Here to discuss driving sales at full throttle in the digital age is Jim Flint, President and founder of Local Search Group. Please give him a warm welcome.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Driving Sales at Full Throttle in the Digital Age. I'm Jim Flint, CEO and founder of Local Search Group and True Blue Media. I'm happy to be here today to speak with you about some of the opportunities that are available to you here in the automotive industry. Before we get into the presentation though, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. This is one of the disclaimers that the NADA would like for me to read at the beginning of the presentation. And it's simply this, that the views and opinions presented in this educational program and any accompanying handout materials are those of the speakers, that's me, and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of NADA. The speakers are not NADA representatives, and their presence on the program is not a NADA endorsement or sponsorship of the speaker or the speaker's company, product, or services. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's jump into the presentation itself. What I'm here to help you with today is the identification of different opportunities that will help you sell more cars in the digital age. And I start with a picture of the Chicago Cubs and the Wrigley Field way back when. You see, it was over 100 years ago that the Chicago Cubs won a World Series. And when things change, or when things take that long to change, something fundamentally has to be different. And in the baseball arena, it was simply that the statistics that people were using to measure success were changing. They were evolving, and there were different opportunities to identify how to best play the game of baseball. And baseball, a lot like automotive sales, is associated with failure. The best players in baseball fail 70% of the time. And in automotive sales, we regularly fail close to 90% of the time. So as we're looking at those failures, we have to understand the statistics. And more importantly, I want to look at the things that can help you understand where our game has changed and how you can take advantage of the differences that are out there. And the thing that's probably changed the most in the last 10 years for us has to do with the smartphone. The biggest change 10 to 20 years ago was the advent of the internet. But now everyone carries the internet around with them in their pockets. And as a result, the shopping behavior and ultimately the buying behavior that you want to convert at your dealerships is different than it was even 5 years ago. You can see this statistically in the number of mobile phones that are available in the US. There are more subscriptions, 327 million plus, than there are people, 300 and we'll call it 18 million. So there are actually more mobile phones than there are people. And as you think about that, and as you think about your travels here to New Orleans, you'll clearly recognize that you take your phone with you almost everywhere you go. And that tracking capability is significant as it relates to your dealership operations today. And as we go through this statistical deep dive, I want you to know that there is an art and a science to the things that we're going to talk about. And it's all relative, because I know that there are experiences that each of you have had that make a difference in terms of how you execute in your dealerships. And I want to say this, it's all relative. And so before I go down deep diving into the data, I want to talk about a little bit of the art. And that piece of the puzzle is simply here. And they're the comments that I hear as I go around the country and talk to different 20 groups, to different dealerships. And it's things like this. Do vehicle display page views matter as much or more as some of the people out there are saying? My bounce rate is way too high. My floor traffic is down and my closing ratios are up, but I'm not necessarily sure what this means. And by the way, Jim, where are all the leads? I need more. I need them now. And then finally I hear conversations about we're running an appointment culture at our store, but I'm not sure that it's working. And so behind these conversations are numbers. And these numbers ultimately change behavior. And this I know, if you measure something, you will improve at it. And in automotive retail, we measure just about everything under the sun. In fact, if you measure it, it's certain that you're going to make adjustments. I've got a picture here of a game between the San Diego Padres and the Los Angeles Dodgers. They clearly were measuring what the batter does when he gets pitched to in a certain way. And as a result, they adjusted. They moved all four of the infielders that would typically be spread equally amongst the baseball diamond and put them on one side of the baseball field. What this guy did on this particular pitch was he grounded out to one of the guys on the right-hand side. This time it worked. But sometimes in automotive retail, we can measure bad things. And when you measure bad things, you're going to earn bad results. So I want to talk today about the opportunities you have to measure the right things and the adjustments that might be necessary to turn your internet dealership, really your internet department, into a bigger, bolder, better internet dealership. So, as I look and do these deep dives on statistics from time to time, I want you to know that I'm going to talk about correlations. And correlations, a perfect correlation is 1 to 1. The goal here isn't 100%. This information is directional. So as we talk about the art and the science, this is the science, but I'm not looking for a perfect score. In fact, I'm looking for directional guidance. And as I look here, for those of you running an appointment culture, it's good to know that in the stats that I study, appointments shown is correlated at 0.67%. But having a background in stats, you're going to have to achieve 0.70 to be statistically significant. This is directionally good, but there are other things that are much more important. Also, floor traffic comes in at 0.67%. Not quite where we want it to be, and really what you should be taking away from this is the next 8 matter much more than these first 2. As you're trying to drive floor traffic, as you're trying to drive appointments, there's some things that show up later on that clearly influence the fact that this isn't as statistically significant as number 1, I would want it to be, or number 2, as you think it should be. And I'd like to dive down into that in just a second. But now that we've crossed this threshold of 0.7, we're getting to the places that matter most. Pages per visit is significant at 0.75. As you look at your Google Analytics, bounce rate doesn't matter nearly as much as it does in terms of the shopping behavior that's happening. The more pictures that people look at, the more cars that people look at, the more pages that they're going to have per visit. Number 7, and this kind of alludes back to the beginning where I talked about phone leads. The center of our universe is the phone. Google is making adjustments that allow people to click to call. They're making adjustments to allow people to click to text. As you look at your handouts, you'll see that there's information about the most important person at your dealership. In all likelihood today is your operator. So make sure that you're handling those phone leads properly, because that's where the people are. One thing that's highly correlated to vehicle sales is your inventory. You can't sell what you don't have. So before you spend a lot of advertising dollars out there, remember that you've got to have product on ground, and you have to have the ability to turn it and earn it before you're able to sell it. Number 5 on the list is the Moneyball factor. And this is actually, there should be a division sign here. It's basically the 4 vehicles that you see there divided by the number of unique sessions that happen on your website. So to give you an example, if you have 10,000 visitors to your website and you have 200 car sales, your Moneyball factor would be 2%. This particular number is not only highly correlated to vehicle sales, but it's also highly correlated to net income. So if profitability is one of your concerns, this would be a key consideration each and every month. As we move up the charts, I'll tell you that the number 4 item is vehicle display views. It's correlated at 0.84. And this is important because the pictures that you take of your car determine how likely it is that somebody will engage in it. This isn't the most important thing, but in terms of focuses that can help you improve, it certainly can help. And there's some tests that you can do that I'll talk about in just a second that can help you take your vehicle display page knowledge to the next level. Now, number 3 is appointments made, and it's at 0.86. This is kind of a big deal, but you might remember earlier, appointments shown wasn't as highly correlated. And so as I'm running my dealership operations, I'm thinking, how does that even make sense? And the reality is, appointments shown could only be lower in correlation to sales than appointments made if the appointments that were being made on price considerations that weren't kept. If they were being made on vehicles that your employees said were there but weren't there. So if you have a true appointment culture, it transcends the idea of just get them in, right? Because if you're just getting them in and they walk through the door and they don't get the price that they were promised, or they don't see the product they were promised, they're leaving. So remember that an appointment culture doesn't mean just get them in the door. It means you commit to them what it is that they're going to have, what it is they're going to experience, and how things are going to operate when they show up at your dealership. Beyond this, the number 2, and I think this is truly part of the appointment culture, involves total desk confirmations. The more desk confirmations that are made, the higher the vehicle sales. And what this means is your general sales manager is actually working the phones. Your used car desk manager and new car desk managers are actually inspecting what they're expecting from the BDC or from their sales team. And so they call the customer and they follow up with the appointment that's been made to say, hey, I wanted you to know that the appointment that Janine made earlier today, actually we're looking forward to seeing you at the dealership for the 3 p.m. VIP treatment. We're going to have that Honda Accord pulled up ready for you so that you can test drive it. We realize your time is very important to you, and we want to use it as wisely as we can to help you make the best shopping decision that you can possibly make. Now, if the employee is doing their job and they've set a firm appointment and the manager follows up with that conversation to a consumer, the likelihood that they'll show up, and moreover, the likelihood that you'll actually sell that car, has gone up immeasurably. And it's time and time again. If the desk manager or general sales manager calls and Janine hasn't made that appointment with the consumer, then he's got to follow back up with her and say, hey, you got to make sure that these things stick, right? I got to make sure that you're not just putting information in because the general manager is saying they want appointments today, right? It's got to be real people with real promises that ultimately end up in real results. And so as we move forward in this digital age and in our effort to drive digital sales at full throttle, the one thing that it still is in the automotive industry, it's still a people business. And you have to have sales personnel. It is the most highly correlated number to vehicle sales. If you look at NADA reports, they'll tell you that on average, a motivated qualified sales consultant will sell about 8.5 cars per month. To keep it simple, let's just think in terms of each person selling 10 cars per month. So as you're thinking about the inventory you have on ground, you have to have that. As you're thinking about your Moneyball factor with those 10,000 visitors to your website and the likelihood that you're closing 2% of those people, in order to get those 200 car sales, you also have to make sure that you have 20 salespeople. Because if you don't, and even if you do make it for a month here and there, the reality is it's not sustainable over time. And for those of you that are looking to grow your business, this is the most important thing you can do. It's more important than spending more advertising dollars, because all the things that you can do to bring people into your store, if they're not able to be greeted, if they're not able to be handled for those appointments that they make, then it won't make a difference at the end of the day in terms of growing your business. So this is a quick segue because there's different goals that we have with this presentation. And now I'm going to talk to you about assembling information for you to be able to track the return on investment that you make with your advertising. And I start here because I know when I hear somebody say this quote that they really don't necessarily understand what the stock market is about. It's recently passed 20,000 on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and I've heard people out and about say that they're not investing because stock market is legalized gambling. Well, that's not true. Stock market, actually, they have a profit motive. If you were in Las Vegas gambling, you could bet on red or black, or you could pick for the Super Bowl either the Falcons or the Patriots, and depending upon which team won the game, you could double your money or lose all of it. But the stock market, they're trying to make money and return shareholder value. So as they try to grow their businesses, what I'm trying to identify are the opportunities where you can have more sales at your dealership that will in turn help you, not the stock market, make more money. And one of the keys is this Google guy, this 800-pound gorilla with the ROIs associated with Google Analytics, Google AdWords, and there's starting to become more and more derivatives out there in terms of your tracking. But I'm telling you guys that there's an opportunity for Google and you to improve at what you do in terms of your tracking. Because as I said earlier, if you measure things and you make bad adjustments, you will earn bad results. And right now, Google does something that isn't necessarily helpful. It's very simple. It's that they will tell you that the default value on many things is $1. But that doesn't work because the value of the goals that you're trying to achieve have different levels of importance. And you have to recognize that, otherwise you shouldn't measure anything at all. And as I look at this, these numbers come from actual dealerships. If you felt like vehicle display page views were very important for you to track and you gave $1 valuations to this particular dealer during one particular month, you'd say that all those vehicle display pages are worth $67,304. But that's not the case. That's like saying that the piece of chocolate cake that you ate last night has 1 calorie and that the salad that you ate this morning at lunch has 1 calorie as well. It's not true. And if you're on a diet and you eat a bunch of chocolate cake, you're going to get to a different place than if you're on a diet and you eat a lot of salad. So as you look, phone calls in this way of measuring would be $1 because there are 1,020 of them. I'll tell you more in a second that phone calls are worth a lot more than $1. And form fills, as you guys know, certainly as they go down are more precious because they help your teams engage with consumers in meaningful ways. So as I move forward, I'm going to do a little geek speak here. You've been warned. But my goal in this is to help you understand how to set values at your dealerships. And this is actually working with actual financial statements from the dealerships. And so in this case, you got to change your vehicle display page views. And that's what I'm going to concentrate on here today. Because the new and used car departments, from a gross profit perspective for this particular store, made $631,000. I'm trying to figure out what the number is. And historically, we've used a value between $8 and $10. You know what? In this case, it comes in at $9.39. So please, at a minimum, go back to your dealership, measure this number, look at your financial statement, look at your Google Analytics, and come up with what's right for your make, your model, and your market. And as you look at this, we're going to talk in a second about the service drive. And one thing you might want to do, since you have a departmental, if you will, income statement, vehicle displays pages for new cars are certainly different than vehicle display pages for used cars. And so I want you, when you set your goals, if you get to a really good level, do this. I want you to take 10 new cars and put pictures of them from your dealership out there. Write down the VIN numbers. I want you to take 10 other new cars, and I want you to use the eVox images, which includes basically the standard default detail from the OEMs. And I want you to see two things. Which units get more vehicle display page views? Typically, the pictures are going to get more vehicle display page views, but I also want you to consider which cars make more gross profit per unit. Because in some models, in some markets, you'll find that pictures of new cars actually diminishes your profitability. And candidly, not understanding the difference between those two creates a scenario where if you have bad data, you will get bad results and you will have earned them. So let's earn the right results by tracking at least 10 cars with pictures and 10 cars without pictures to understand the differences that shape your makes, your models, and your markets. Now, as I dive deeper into this, I want you to know that yesterday, literally yesterday, I had a phone call with Google, and in it, I discussed an issue. They do not have phone call tracking in Google Analytics, and they absolutely should. You've seen that it's the first thing on the list of things that have changed our operational environment. So to get your multi-channel funnel goals set up, I want to go through this, and I'll go through it very quickly. This is something that you'll have to rewatch a few times. You'll have to be logged into your Google account. And so I'm going to hit this quick, and we're going to move through it. But there are basically 5 steps. Number 1, you have to have admin access and log into your account for standard goals. This is the local search group account. I go into the goals, and I set up 2 things for the purposes of this exercise. Number 1, you want to know when somebody submits a lead. And number two, you want to know when you have a vehicle display page view. There are certain intricacies associated with this, but fundamentally without goals, you can't get results. You can't track your analytics. So after you set those two things up, you want to go through this click sequence within the Google Analytics tool. It's CMA, it doesn't stand for Country Music Awards. It stands for conversions, multi-channel funnels, and assisted conversions. Go through that click sequence and you should be able to see something like this. And there are 6 categories that Google, first and foremost, breaks out their information into. There's direct, organic, paid, referral, display, and social network. And as you look, you'll notice that I've set values for the vehicle display pages, and I've set values for the leads that can be submitted through the website. And as you look at these values, you'll see there are assisted conversions and direct conversions. Simply put, direct conversions are the last step that a person takes before they do what it is that you want them to do. So in this case, a direct conversion for organic search, there were 2,054 people who did what we wanted them to do on the website. Because there's values associated with these goals, I can tell you, as you see the numbers there, how much it's actually worth in terms of whether or not it contributed to the ultimate goal or it actually caused the ultimate goal, because all these elements work together. Now, some of you, as you're looking at this, going, well, there's a couple of things I don't understand. I don't want to read the definitions to you, but to be successful in Google Analytics, you've got to understand what direct traffic is, and you have to understand what referral traffic is. Here they are defined for you. Again, if you're measuring things that you don't understand, you have to adjust to get to the place where you do understand them. And when you're there, you've actually only just begun. Because in our particular category, retail automotive, you have to acknowledge the different sources where you can secure information from. And we've got what I call a custom channel starter list. You can see that you should create a channel grouping called Automotive Sales Channel. Then to the right of this circle at the top, you'll hit the plus button. And then you need to start adding other locations. You need to add AutoTrader. You need to add Cars.com, Carfax, KBB, Pandora, Facebook, Twitter, Google, email, paid search, organic search. Because once you do that, now you can get to the place that's starting to matter. And that's in step 5, where you add a secondary dimension. And the secondary dimension is otherwise known as the source. And once you do this, and guys, I am moving fast, you start to see the breakout of things like paid search. Because within paid search, there's cost per click and there's display. Those two things behave in very different ways. You can also look down here at number 11 and 12 on your screen, and you can see that it actually breaks out autotrader.com in terms of a desktop experience and autotrader.com in terms of a mobile experience. And so in the mobile environment for AutoTrader, you'll see that there are more direct conversions, and you'll see that in the desktop environment, there's more assisted conversions. Those types of things make a huge difference in terms of how you think about allocating the limited resources that you have. So this information, now you're starting to gain some power behind the big data that's out there. And as I look at this one in particular, I did the calculation for paid search. And you can see these two categories add up to, and I'm trying to come up with a value. And as you spend your dollars, and dealers, I want to caution you against this, right? Because I know I've been working in this industry for 20 years. And when I tell you that your advertising expense, it costs you $14,960 for advertising that much in Google AdWords, and then I tell you that the value is only $13,655, you're going to tell me that's bad. That's bad. We need to cut the budget. And I'll be like, hold on. And this is where Google kind of falls short, because the data is going to tell me, based on those two things that I want to track, that the vehicle display pages, right, and that the inventory leads are going to total up to this particular number. But we're not calculating phone calls, and I'd argue that's the most valuable thing that it is that Google can do today. They might even tell you the same thing, because all their marketing programs, all the adjustments that they're making are certainly going down that path. So when you see those numbers, it's the time to stay calm and tell Houston we have a problem. That's where I'm from. We like the fact that the person is calling. And as you call, you can track information. Interestingly, information is available in Google AdWords. I'm showing you that the number's here. And remember I mentioned earlier the default setting thing? See, their default setting, what's a call worth? Each call is worth $1. Please, please, if you do anything, make that adjustment when you get back to your dealership. Don't allocate the cost or value at $1. They're worth certainly more. In fact, I went down the path to try to understand what the value of a phone call is. This isn't perfect. It is the combination of art and science. This is us advancing the conversation, because what I did is I took the gross profit for new and used as well as the gross profit for parts and service. Interestingly enough, it added up to about $1 million. And you see, there are phone calls that are coming in from your AdWords campaign. Remember, it's 265 phone calls. Well, as I looked, there were also 755 other additional phone calls that came in. And as I bring this whole thing together, I'm really realizing that there's about 1,020 calls, and the value, based on $1 million gross profit at the dealership, for simplicity's sake, is right at $1,000 per call. Now, if you remember, when we talked about earlier, if we did the $1 for everything valuation, this is what it would look like. Phone calls would be worth about $1,000. But when I do the valuation considering the amount of gross profit that they're bringing to the table, it drives it all the way up to $1 million. Now, to make a point here, and this is my car dog millionaire moment, I'd argue that you'd want to be able to pay $1,000 per car for 1,000 calls if you could turn it into $1 million of gross profit. Now, some of this is exaggeration, but the importance here is that you're driving your dealership operations. And if at the moment of truth, when somebody's ready to monetize with you, you're not prepared to handle the phone call, you're really not prepared to do business. I'd even argue that you're not in business. And as a result, I did have to bring some reason into it. I had to realize that some of those calls were organic, and I had to realize that about half of those calls were going to parts and service. The issue of being able to handle the phone calls is still the same, but in terms of allocating the resource and assigning a value to it within your dealership, I would tell you you'd put about half of that expense to parts and service, and you put about half of that expense to new and to used cars. And as a result, things start to shape up in a way that can help me determine whether or not the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. See, I've been breaking the car apart here during the presentation today. I'm about to bring it all back together. Hopefully you're still here with me. The big takeaway, the aha moment, is that on your Google Analytics, you've got to be able to add a line back in for calls. It's the most important thing they do. It's the best opportunity for you to convert to business. It's fundamentally where the people are. That's the dot that connects this together. And so as I talk to Google and they don't update this, I just bring it up every time that we have one of our routine monthly phone calls. And in this case, I've assigned a value to the amount because a phone call fundamentally is a direct conversion. And as I look at that $14,960 that you were about to cut to a lower number, I tell you, because of the value associated with the phone calls, you have a much stronger argument for increasing your advertising spend in this particular situation. But at the end of the day, you got to break these three categories, because I've only got 3 goals in this instance, and I valued each of the 3 goals against the gross profitability of the dealership. So at the end of the day, I've got this huge aggregate number that I've got to divide by 3 in order to get down to the fact that I have 3 goals. So when you divide those numbers out, and all the math is right here, you would find out that the value of what this dealership is doing is about $75,000. And so as you look at that, interestingly enough, they're spending about $75,000 in their financials. Whether or not this is coincidence, candidly doesn't matter. The thing, as a dealer operator, as a general manager, as somebody who's worried about the net income of your dealership, the one thing you should be considered, that should be considered most, is cost per sale. Cost per sale is king, because all these other tracking mechanisms, if you don't do them right, aren't worth doing. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your employees' times, you're wasting your agency's time. So at the end of the day, you can go through the litany of things that I've gone through, or you can know your cost per sale and manage your dealership operations equally as effectively. Because if you track bad things and you get bad results, you've earned them. The last thing I want to mention here today in my limited time with you is the case for car leads in 2017. The thing that we've got to do as an industry is actually connect the clicks to the dealer website. The technology is certainly available, and there are companies like Motor Trend that help you bring the vehicle display page to your dealership. The other possibility, and there are other vendors out there who shall remain nameless, who keep the vehicle display pages and views from the consumers on their third-party site. Well, I know this, they're in business to lower the pricing. It's a competitive environment that we exist in today. So any chance that you have as a dealer operator to drive activity to your dealership website means that you're going to have more first-party leads and you're going to have greater gross profitability. You know, at the end of the day, you want to be able to take care of the consumers in your local area, not just from a sales side, not from a new side only, not from a used car side only, but also for service. So the ability to have those locations and zip codes closer to you drive retail business closer to your dealership website is ultimately where you want to go. And as you look at that, there are plenty of vendors out there who can do that directly, and those are the vendors that I would encourage you to work with. Additionally, I will mention as you look at car leads, the values have to be commensurate with the cost. I don't know, 8 years ago, you could get leads for $20 per lead. Now, leads aren't happening nearly as much, and so you have to really reassess where you are. The technology moves so fast that every 18 months, whatever it was that you thought you knew 18 months ago isn't any longer necessarily true. It could be true, but it might not be. And so you have to check into your makes, your models, and your markets to adjust your cost considerations. So these are the key presentation takeaways. I think we've addressed those, but as we close out the session, I'll leave you with these actionable items. Please change your Google default settings off of $1. It has to be something different than that, or you shouldn't do it. After you change it off of $1, go about the business of determining your correct values. Number 3, add your phone calls into the analytics mix. If you don't do that, you're missing where the people are and where your employees can create considerable productive action for the monetization and profitability of your retail outlet. And then finally, if you don't do any of the top 3, just do number 4. Keep track of your cost per sale metric, and you'll have much more success in your digital operations. I'd like to thank everybody for their time today. And if you have questions, we look forward to seeing you at booth 5907. Thank you, everybody.